Discover the amazing, touching journey that transformed a millionaire CEO in just 30 days. Mark Sullivan stood in his sleek, high-rise office, the glow of liquidity and success surrounding him like a shimmering mirage. Below, Chicago throbbed with life, families hustling home, children laughing in parks, and neighbors gathering over barbecues. But in Mark's heart, a silence deeper than the skyscrapers pressed against his chest. He watched it all from above, detached and solitary, a self-made millionaire carrying the weight of a forgotten childhood. His phone buzzed, slicing through the quiet like a knife. The caller ID flashed Johnny Harris, a name from the past. As Mark answered, a familiar voice trembled through the receiver. Johnny, once his partner in mischief, was now a local veteran struggling to find his footing after a devastating injury. Mark felt a pang of guilt as memories of wild adventures flooded his mind: bike rides, summer nights, dreams shared under the stars. How far he'd drifted from where it all began. "We need your help, man," Johnny's voice cracked, awakening a sense of duty that Mark thought had long withered away. That moment, Mark realized his life had become a race for profits, leaving behind the real treasures of connection and community. Could he really ignore the hardship that surrounded him, all because he chased a golden dream? With a flicker of nostalgia ignited by Johnny's pain, he made a decision that shocked even him. He would return to the neighborhood he once called home for 30 days. When he arrived, memories swept over him like a wave, but the vibrant streets he remembered were marred by neglect and despair. The air felt heavy with resignation, and each familiar face bore a mix of warmth and skepticism. Mark poured himself into community work, volunteering at centers and helping families catch a break. Each smile he brought glistened like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, but with every act of kindness, he faced unrelenting reminders of his estranged sister, Amy, who had always championed the values of belonging and community. One fateful afternoon, tempers flared between the siblings, old wounds resurfacing in a searing argument. "You think you can just throw money at problems and that'll fix everything?" Amy had shouted, her eyes blazing with hurt. "You forgot where you came from, Mark?" With those words hanging in the air, Mark felt something crack open inside him, an avalanche of guilt and regret. The deeper he dug into community spirit, the more the echoes of his past guided him, illuminating the slivers of hope buried beneath layers of unspoken pain. Just as despair loomed large, a moment of unexpected vulnerability brought him face to face with a newcomer to the community, a woman struggling to provide for her kids. They exchanged stories, laughter intertwining with tears, and suddenly, Mark saw the power of connection. He was drawn not just to his own story but to those around him who shared their burdens courageously. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The more he helped, the more unearthed secrets began to unravel, especially those hidden in his own heart. Then he stumbled across troubling details about his company exploiting the very community he now served. Facing a moral crossroad, Mark stood at the edge, grappling with the question: was his wealth a burden or a blessing? As he prepared to address the community about what he discovered, Mark could feel the weight of his past pressing down on him. Would the ghosts of his earlier life rise to haunt him, or would he embrace this chance for change? The crowd stared back, hopeful yet wary, waiting to discover whether his heart had truly transformed, or if he would choose silence yet again. Mark took a deep breath, glancing at the faces in front of him. Each person was a world of their own, filled with dreams and struggles he hadn't seen until now. The burden settled heavily in his chest, but he pushed back the fear. This was no longer just about him. It was about them. "Thank you all for coming today," he began, voice shaky but resolute. "I want to talk about something that matters, a revelation I had while working alongside you." He scanned the crowd and noticed Amy standing at the back, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. A tightening of nerves clenched his stomach, but he tried to focus on the task ahead. I've learned more in these past few weeks than I have in years. A murmur swept through the crowd. Some looked hopeful, others skeptical. Mark felt the heat of their eyes, welcoming yet cautious. He pressed on. I discovered that my company, my decisions have hurt this community more than I understood. Even saying the words was a reckoning. Gasps echoed in the crowd. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Mark squared his shoulders and gathered his courage. We combined profits with exploitation, and it needs to stop. I refuse to hide behind wealth and ambition any longer. It's time we work together for a better future. A few voices rose, murmuring disbelief. Why should we believe you now? One woman called out. You just come here, spouting ideals after years of neglect. Mark met her gaze, determination solidifying his resolve. You're right. I've made mistakes, and I can't erase the past, but I can make amends. I want to hear your stories, your needs. I'm committed to finding solutions together. He felt the weight of Amy's stare intensifying. It wasn't just a battle for trust. It was a battle for her approval. The silence that followed was thick, yet pregnant with possibility. Would they give him a chance? An older man stepped forward, his features lined with years of hard labor and resilience. Words are just words, boy. Show us you mean it, he said gruffly, and don't expect trust without action. Mark nodded, absorbing the challenge. Then let us do just that. I'll host meetings. We'll gather voices and create a plan. Together. A ripple of uncertain murmurs spread through the crowd, but for the first time, he also noticed flickers of hope. For the first time, it felt like the walls built around their hearts might be ready to crack. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Mark walked with Amy. Her silence was palpable, and each step felt heavier. I thought you'd forgotten, she finally said, her voice strained. Do you really think you can just fix everything with your ideas? I want to fix things, Amy. I know it won't be easy or immediate, but I'm committed. She looked at him, a hint of vulnerability shining through her guarded expression. You can't just throw money at the problem. You have to understand people's stories. I know now that wealth isn't everything, he replied, feeling his heart open more with each word. I want to be part of something bigger than myself. Mark saw her eyes soften, even if just a little. Perhaps the door of one broken relationship was inching ajar. But the shadows of old wounds still loomed. That night, as he lay in bed, he wrestled with an unsettling thought. Could he truly bear the responsibility of shifting the very foundation of the company he built? Would the executives back home agree with his vision? His heart raced at the enormity of it all, and uncertainty threatened to swirl him back into the comfort of silence. Finally, he felt the weight of the decision ahead. Was he ready to risk everything to right his wrongs? The tension in his gut twisted tighter. What would he sacrifice to redeem himself? And in that moment of introspection, he felt the ground beneath him shift once again. As the city pulsed with life below, one question lingered in the air. Would he have the courage to face the consequences of his past and step boldly into a new future for them all? The next morning, Mark woke to the sound of his alarm blaring like an angry hornet. The bright light streaming through the window felt harsh, yet it mirrored the fire igniting in his gut. Today was the day. He rolled out of bed, determination fueling each movement. He dressed swiftly, his mind racing with possibilities as he threw on a casual shirt and jeans. This wasn't about appearances anymore. He grabbed a notepad and a pen, promising himself he would listen more than he spoke. When he arrived at the community center, the air buzzed with anticipation. It was starting to feel like a gathering of old friends rather than the usual tension-filled meetings. The chairs were filled, and as he walked in, eyes turned towards him, some skeptical but others gleaming with cautious hope. "Good morning, everyone," he said, trying to project warmth in his voice. "I appreciate you coming once again. I know trust takes time, but I want to earn it." A woman in the front row, a middle-aged mother named Clara, stood up. "You speak of trust and change, but what can we do? Words are just smoke, Mark. We've lived with broken promises for too long. Her words hit hard, echoing Mark's own fears. I understand, he responded, his voice steady yet gentle. But today I want to start with listening. I want to hear your stories, the good, the bad, all of it. Let us map out your needs together. He gestured for members from the crowd to share. It began slowly, hesitantly, but as Clara spoke about her struggles to provide for her children, others joined in. One by one, they opened up like flowers unveiling their petals to the sun. Their stories were tinged with hardship yet radiant with resilience. They spoke of lost jobs, foregone meals, and dreams pushed aside. Each confession sent ripples of empathy across the room. Mark's heart ached in tandem with their pain, and his resolve to make a difference deepened in the midst of sharing. A hand shot up at the back. Amy was standing with fiery conviction. Mark, this isn't just about fixing the company. It's about healing the scars you've left in our lives. Can you really do that? The question hung thick in the air, and the room fell silent. Her challenge pierced right to the center of his intentions. I don't know if I can heal every scar, he began, feeling the weight of vulnerability. But I want to try, and that means being here, being accountable, a partner, not just a boss. He caught her gaze, and there was a flicker of something unguarded, a willingness to believe. It gave him the courage to press on. Let us create working groups, determine priorities as a community, and I promise, I'll be present every step of the way. As that moment settled, the subtle flush of hope started to rise like a tide in the room. They might finally be ready to bridge the gap between a community's dreams and his ambitions. After the meeting, Mark found himself engulfed by a crowd eager to shake his hand, share ideas, and build plans. Every word felt like a step toward redemption. But suddenly, an unsettling question shot through his mind. How would the executives at his company react when they saw his commitment? As he stood there, heart racing at the prospect of defiance, he realized it wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about people, real lives shifting in his grasp. With a mix of exhilaration and dread, he thought, what if all his efforts backfire? Would they support him, or would he face backlash from the very people who had once cheered him on? The thought locked his muscles tight. He had unveiled the truth about their community, but was he ready to face the truth of his own? All that uncertainty swirled in his chest, and as he stepped out into the sunlight, he couldn't help but wonder. Would the gamble for honesty lead to freedom or failure? Only time would tell. The sun felt warmer on Mark's skin as he stepped outside, the warmth contrasting sharply with the icy grip of doubt knotting in his stomach. He leaned against the building, taking a moment to breathe, to let the hopeful energy from the meeting settle in. The voices of Clara, Amy, and others echoed in his head. They were raw, real stories, and each one chipped away at the walls he had built around himself. A sudden honk jerked him from his thoughts. It was Will, one of the community members, pulling up in a beat-up old car. Hey Mark, you coming to our planning meeting at the diner later? He called, leaning out the window with an excited smile. Absolutely, Mark replied, surprised by his own eagerness. This was it. This was different. He wasn't just going to hide behind the boardroom walls anymore. As they chatted, Will shared more ideas and hopes. His enthusiasm was infectious, painting a vivid picture of what they could achieve together. The idea of a community initiative that aligned with the company's core values started to take shape. Mark felt a thrill at how this could transform not only the lives of those in the community but the perception of his company itself. Yet, beneath that thrill lingered a shadow of fear. The executive team was used to conventional tactics: cut costs, maximize profits, chase numbers. They didn't care much for community spirit. What would happen if they rejected this shift? What if they saw it as a weakness, not a strength? He shook his head, trying to dispel those doubts. No, he had to do this. Not just for the community but for himself. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting Clara's words ring in his ears again. Healing the scars, it was personal now. These weren't just strangers to him. They were potential friends, a support system he had overlooked for far too long. When he arrived at the diner, the air was thick with the smell of coffee and fresh pastries. A group of about 10 community members were huddled in a booth, eager to brainstorm and plan. As Mark joined them, he was struck by the warmth of their welcome. There was laughter, to a musical sound that filled any remaining cracks of hesitation in Marcus' heart. "All right, so what's next?" he asked, diving right into the thick of the plans. Ideas bounced around the table. They spoke about starting a job training program, a food co-op, and even mentorship for kids in the area. Each suggestion brightened the room, igniting a shared passion that felt like hope taking flight. After hours passed like minutes, Mark looked around, heart swelling with pride. These were real solutions driven by the community's needs, and they all seemed to have the belief that together, they could make a difference. It was intoxicating, but also terrifying as he stepped outside the diner that night. The chill of the evening air bit at him, sharpening his thoughts. What lay ahead, with his commitment now spoken and witnessed? He had a feeling he was standing on the edge of something monumental, just as exhilarating as it was daunting. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from Simon, one of the executives. "We need to discuss your community meeting tomorrow. It's about time we got together." The question loomed large in his mind. Would he be ready to defend his vision? Would he risk it all for a chance to finally make a genuine impact? He took a deep breath, the weight of his choices pressing against his chest. Mark started to walk home, excitement and anxiety battling inside him. The moment of truth was coming, and he had to prepare. What would he say when the executive team pushed back? Mark woke up the next morning with a heaviness in his chest. The conversation he'd be having later loomed over him like a storm cloud, ready to burst. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring blankly at the wall. The sun streamed through his window, casting warm patches of light on the floor, but they offered little comfort. After a quick shower, he dressed in a crisp shirt and tie, trying to exude confidence that he didn't feel. Each button he fastened felt like a clenching knot in his stomach. Today could change everything. It was about more than just a meeting. It was a chance to align his world with the struggling community outside his office. But how could he make others see that? On his drive to work, he rehearsed points in his mind. Paint a compelling picture, he told himself. Speak from the heart. But just like that, the knots tightened again. What if the suits in the boardroom dismissed him outright? They had their own agendas, their own priorities. Would they even listen? As he entered the office building, he felt the familiar buzz of urgency around him. Employees rushed by, glued to their screens, tracking their next targets and goals. Mark forced a smile, exchanging pleasantries, but all he could think about was his upcoming confrontation. Finally, he reached the glass conference room where the meeting would take place. The executive team drifted in, each settling around the table, exchanging bland chit-chat. Simon sat at the head of the table, a man with a sharp mind and an even sharper edge. He clasped his hands together, ready to dive into business. "All right, Mark," Simon said, his voice filled with authority. "Let us hear your proposal. You've got a community initiative in the works. What's all this about?" Mark took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the room. He opened his mouth, words spilling out like a waterfall. "I believe there is a real opportunity for us to connect with the community," he said, glancing around. "If we start with a job training program and mentorship, it could energize both our workforce and the neighborhood." He described the meeting at the diner, the ideas that had sparked like fireworks, the laughter and hope that filled the air. He spoke passionately, pouring every ounce of his conviction into each sentence. For a moment, he felt the numbness thawing, the passion warming him. But then, as he caught Simon's cool gaze, reality hit. "That sounds nice, Mark," he interrupted sharply. "But we're not a charity. This company is built on profits, and we can't afford to get sidetracked by community issues. How does this translate into numbers?" Mark felt the familiar weight return, pressing heavy on his shoulders. "Simon, if we take the time to invest in our community, it can boost our brand image in ways that numbers can't quantify. It's not just about profits today, it's about building relationships that last. But what guarantees us success?" Another executive chimed in, crossing his arms. "This sounds like a risky diversion from the bottom line." Mark's heart sank. Were they really so blind? He swallowed hard, searching for something, anything, to turn this tide. Every great company invests in its community. It leads to loyalty, growth. We're not just a company. We have to be a part of our world. SNT, that what we stand for? Silence filled the room, thick and palpable. Mark's mind raced, desperate to find the right words to break through this hard shell of skepticism. He could almost hear the murmurs of the community, the hopes and dreams he felt in that diner. Would they let him down? In that moment, a flicker of determination ignited within him. We can change lives. We can help heal the scars and build a future that benefits everyone. Are we willing to take that first step? As Mark finished, he sensed a shift in the atmosphere. Could he have planted a seed of hope? Or was it too late? He searched the faces around him, seeking a sign of understanding, a glimpse of belief. And just then, Simon spoke again, the weight of his decision hanging like a fragile lifeline in the air. Let us see some concrete plans. And projections, Mark. Then we'll consider what you've said. As Mark left the conference room, he wondered, would he be able to transform these skeptics into allies? Would he find the courage to push harder for the community's future? Or would fear hold him back? What was the next step in this unfolding journey? Mark stepped out of the conference room, his heart still racing. The executive meeting felt like a whirlwind, a tornado of doubts and possibilities. He took a moment to breathe, leaning against the cold wall. Felt both stark and refreshing, grounding him. Had he made any progress? For now, it felt like he was still standing at the edge of a cliff, uncertain about the leap. That as he walked back to his office, he replayed the conversation in his mind. Simon's icy demeanor had thrown him off. But then that flare of hope, a spark in the atmosphere when he spoke from the heart. Maybe he hadn't lost them entirely. Could he chart a course forward? He settled into his chair, opened his laptop, and began to draft his next moves. An outline of projects began to take shape on the screen: job training programs, mentorship initiatives, community events. He envisioned people smiling, locals gathering around, sharing experiences, and building connections. Each word flowed from him like water, refreshing his spirit. A sudden knock on the door jolted him back to reality. It was Sarah, his assistant, her eyes shining with curiosity. "Hey, Mark, how did it go? You looked intense in there." He offered a faint smile, still caught between hope and uncertainty. "It was challenging. They're skeptical. They want numbers and guarantees. Have you thought about involving some community leaders? Maybe they could provide testimonials or data to back up your ideas," she suggested, leaning against the doorframe. The suggestion lit something in him. "That's a great idea, Sarah. If we can show them real stories, real impact." His voice trailed off as he imagined the faces of those community members, the diner crew, the parents with dreams for their kids, the hopeful teenagers eager to learn. "Exactly," she beamed. "Let me set up some meetings with local organizations. We can gather their insights, maybe even share some success stories." "Do it." His confidence was returning bit by bit. He could feel the threads of connection weaving together. "We need to turn this concern about profits into actual stories. That's how we create impact." As the day unfolded, Mark found himself diving deeper into plans for the initiative. He worked into the evening, fueled by determination and newfound purpose. With Sarah at his side, they reached out to local leaders, scheduled meetings, and began crafting a presentation that would showcase the heart of the community. By the time he left the office, the sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The day might have started with doubts, but it ended with a renewed sense of purpose. He sensed that he was finally stepping into the role he'd always envisioned for himself, someone not just in business for profit, but a leader eager to make a difference. But as he headed home, Mark remembered Simon's words. "Let us see some concrete plans." Would presenting real proposals be enough to sway the higher-ups? What if they still resisted? The uncertainty coursed through him again, much like a current from the sea. Mark gazed out at the horizon, contemplating how far he'd come, yet feeling the weight of what lay ahead. He had ignited a spark today, but would it be enough to light the way in the coming storm? Would they see the vision he was beginning to form, or would he find himself battling against the tide once more? The next chapter of his journey awaited, both exciting and terrifying at once. Mark awoke to the sound of his phone buzzing on the bedside table. Morning light streamed through the window, illuminating the small room with the promises of a new day. He rubbed his eyes, recalling the surge of determination that had gripped him the night before. This was the day to gather stories, real stories, and to show Simon and the board the potential of what they could truly accomplish together. After a quick breakfast, he stepped outside. The air was crisp, and he felt a subtle thrill in his chest, a mixture of eagerness and nervousness. Today would set the foundation for everything that lay ahead. He hopped into his car, the engine rumbling to life as he set off toward the community center. As he drove, he envisioned the faces of those he hoped to meet. Samuel, the diner owner with a heart of gold, and Lila, the single mother striving to build a better life for her son. Each of them had a story that could sway the skeptics back at the office. The community center bustled with energy upon his arrival. Children played in a nearby park, their laughter mingling with the sounds of conversation from the adults. Mark observed them for a moment, breathing in the vibrant atmosphere. It was a reminder of why he was fighting so hard a chance to give these families the opportunities they sorely needed. Mark! A cheerful voice broke through his thoughts. He turned to see Sarah approaching, her arms laden with folders and notebooks. Ready to change the world? Ready as I'll ever be, he replied, a smile creeping across his face. They moved inside, where the local leaders were already gathering. Mark could feel the buzz of anticipation in the air, a collective hope springing forth as they exchanged greetings and laughter. He started by asking questions, listening intently as they shared their experiences. Change doesn't come easy, Samuel said, wiping his brow. But if we pool our resources and tell our stories, we can make waves. Mark nodded, taking notes frantically, each word resonating deep within him. This was it. The real data, the heartfelt narratives that would connect the dots for the executives who only saw percentages. As they moved through the discussions, each story painted a vivid picture of resilience, struggle, and triumph. Lila spoke of her late-night studies, dreaming of a better future for her son. Mark felt a tear sting the corner of his eye. These weren't just numbers. They were people, lives intertwined with aspirations. After hours of sharing, Sarah presented the idea of forming a coalition among the local leaders. Together we can present not just our successes but the roadblocks we face, she suggested. This is more than just data. It's our community's voice begging to be heard. Inspired, Mark chimed in, we can package these narratives into a presentation that's both informative and emotional. Let us show them the real impact. As they left the community center, Mark felt lighter, invigorated by the connections he had fostered. He was no longer just a man with a plan. He was part of a movement, a force ready to challenge the status quo. But as he drove back to the office, doubt crept in. Would Simon and the board truly understand the depth of these stories? What if they dismissed the emotional weight as sentimentality? Despite the doubts swimming in his mind, one thing was clear. He was on the brink of something momentous. This could be the moment he transforms the perspective of his colleagues, the exact tipping point that pulls everyone toward a shared vision. As he parked the car and stepped into the building, a wave of resolve washed over him. But the question remained, could he convince others to see through his eyes? And just as he walked through the doors, he overheard hushed whispers from the boardroom. Were they discussing his initiative already? Something ignited in him, a mix of excitement and dread. The challenge awaited him. Right at the threshold, would it be the breakthrough they needed, or just another door closing? Mark stepped into the dimly lit hallway, the conversations inside the boardroom drifting to his ears like faint echoes. Every whisper felt like a wave crashing against his chest, a reminder of what was at stake. He could only imagine the expressions on their faces as they weighed his proposal. Excitement tangled with dread. It was a tightrope walk on the cusp of uncertainty. Let us do this, he murmured to himself, pulling his shoulders back. There was no turning back now. He opened the boardroom door to find Simon leaning back in his chair, a thoughtful look on his face as he spoke to the other board members. Mark's heart raced as he assessed the crowd. Some looked skeptical, their brows furrowed, while others leaned in, enraptured by whatever Simon was saying. It felt like stepping into an important scene in a movie he was unprepared for. "Ah, Mark. Perfect timing," Simon said, turning the attention toward him. "You won't believe the conversation we just had." Mark's pulse quickened, a spark of hope igniting within him. "Thanks, Simon. I heard some whispers outside and couldn't help but wonder what you all think about the coalition initiative," Mark responded, trying to keep his voice steady. The board members exchanged glances and smiles, which only deepened Mark's curiosity. "We were discussing the potential impact of uniting our local leaders," Simon said, gesturing for Mark to take a seat. "It seems there's a growing excitement around it." "Exactly," Mark jumped in, his passion bubbling over. "The stories I gathered, they exemplify the community's strengths and challenges. They're just waiting to be shared." One of the board members, Jane, leaned forward. "Can you delve deeper into that, Mark? What do these stories look like? What do they mean for us?" "Of course," he replied, taking a deep breath. "Think of Lila. She's a single mother who's balancing work and school, pushing for a brighter future for her son. Or Samuel, who brings the community together with his diner. These aren't just cases, their lives, forces that drive change." As he spoke, he saw a glimmer of understanding in their eyes. The chatter began to simmer down, attention focused on him. Mark leaned into the moment, his passion catalyzing something within the room. "Imagine presenting these stories alongside our data, not just at our next meeting, but as part of our strategy moving forward. If we show the human side of our efforts, we can reshape perspectives, ours and theirs." Several heads nodded, but Simon remained silent, his gaze piercing through Mark as if measuring the validity of his words. The tension in the room felt tangible, like a taut string vibrating with unresolved potential. "What if I organize a session where all the leaders can come and share their stories directly?" Mark added, feeling emboldened. "Let them speak for themselves. It would be powerful." Simon's eyes narrowed slightly, considering. "And what do you want from us in return?" The question hung heavy in the air. "Support," Mark said simply, his heart racing. "Your backing would show the community that we believe in their voices, that we're committed to change." Could ignite a strong movement. A deep silence ensued, and Mark could practically hear the gears turning in their heads. For a brief moment, everything felt suspended, as though the future hung delicately between them. Finally, Simon spoke, his voice steady. "All right, Mark. Let's set this plan into motion. I believe you have something special here." Mark's heart soared, but just as quickly, he felt a new wave of doubt. What if this moment slipped through his fingers? Would the community really gather? Would their stories resonate? "Thank you, Simon," he managed to say, a hint of disbelief in his tone as they discussed logistics. He felt a rush of adrenaline mixed with trepidation. What lay ahead was uncertain, but it was a step toward something genuine, a path to real change. But as the meeting progressed, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that they were just scratching the surface. There was more beneath the surface he still needed to uncover. And, just as he thought things couldn't get any more thrilling, a commotion erupted from outside the building, followed by an urgent voice rushing in. "You need to see this. It's serious." Mark's heart dropped. What awaited him beyond those doors now? Mark's stomach twisted as he looked at Simon and the board members. Their faces mirrored his growing concern. He pushed past the shock and stepped quickly toward the door. The urgency in the voice echoed in his mind like a distant alarm. What had unfolded just outside? As he exited the boardroom, the hallway buzzed with a mix of anticipation and fear. He found a group of employees gathered near the entrance, their voices a chaotic blend of confusion and urgency. Mark could barely make out the details whispered back and forth, but the tension was palpable. "What happened?" he asked, stepping into the cluster. A young intern pointed outside, her face pale. "There's a crowd gathering. They're protesting something about the upcoming cuts and the community outreach program. It's wild out there." Mark's heart sank as he processed her words. A protest? Just when he was gathering momentum with the board, this would turn it into a whirlwind. The stories he wanted to share, the movement he hoped to build, everything now seemed at risk. "They said they want answers," They're calling for a stop to everything. Another employee chimed in, anxiety etched on her face. They're not going to just leave quietly. Mark's mind raced. This wasn't coincidental. It was a crisis in the making. He stepped out the glass doors, feeling the chill of the outside air against his skin. The scene before him was daunting. A sea of faces filled the small square, holding signs that voiced their anger and demands. The voices of protest rose like a thunderstorm, fierce and unyielding, creating a soundscape that drowned out everything else. He recognized some of the faces members of the community he had hoped to uplift. "Enough is enough," shouted a woman at the front, her voice cracking through the air. "We've waited too long for change, so let us be heard." Mark's heart ached. This wasn't just a disconnected group. They were people who had trusted him and the organization he represented. They wanted someone to listen. He felt the weight of the moment press down on him, the gravity of what was happening pulling at his resolve. Without thinking, he stepped forward, raising his hands to signal for quiet. Surprisingly, the crowd began to settle, their expressions shifting from anger to curiosity. This was his chance. Their hope was written on their faces, a silent plea that sparked a fire within him. "I'm Mark," he called out, his voice steady though his heart raced. "I'm here to listen. I want to hear your concerns. We can't ignore what you're saying." The crowd shifted, some looking to one another as if weighing his words. Then he noticed Lila near the edge, her eyes wide with surprise. She lifted her sign higher, a simple message that pierced through the chaos. "We matter." "Exactly," he said, locking eyes with her. "Your voices matter. You must be heard. Tell me what's on your mind." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The moment felt electric, the kind of connection that could either lead to despair or transformation. Mark felt an urgency swell within him. He wasn't just a representative anymore. He was part of this community. But just as he opened the floor for dialogue, a shadow swept across his path. Simon's form emerged from the building, his expression tight with concern. "Mark, we should get back inside. This could get out of hand." "No," Mark shot back, the conviction rising within him. "This is exactly where I need to be. I need to be here for them." As he stood, the weight of his decision hung heavily. Was he truly ready to take on this responsibility? What if everything fell apart? Behind him, Simon's voice softened, but Mark couldn't turn back now. The community was looking to him for hope and leadership. But just as he prepared to address the crowd again, he heard a distant siren wailing in the background. It was racing closer. The reality of the situation could take a turn for the worse. This was just the beginning, and the stakes were rising. What would happen if the authorities arrived? Would this show of unity be crushed before it even bloomed? Mark could feel the ground shifting under him, and at that moment, he understood the true battle had only just begun. Mark stood at the edge of the crowd, uncertainty knotting his stomach. Panic swirled around him, but deep down, he felt a flicker of courage ignite. This moment felt vital, more significant than any meeting back in the boardroom. The crowd's eyes were fixated on him, their expressions a blend of hope, anger, and desperation. "Listen," he shouted, his voice cutting through the din. "I'm here because I want to make things right. I've seen the struggles you all face, and I know words alone won't change anything. But I'm committed to working together with you." Just as he began to feel a response ripple through the audience, the sirens grew louder, echoing through the streets. It suddenly felt like a storm brewing, a storm that could either break down barriers or crush dreams. He had to act fast. "Let us turn this moment into something powerful," he urged, stepping closer to the edge of the crowd, trying to connect with their energy. "Together, we'll demonstrate that our voices can't be ignored. Share your stories. Let us turn our struggles into a message for change." The crowd thrummed with a fresh pulse of life. A woman stepped forward, her hands gripping a painted sign. "They say we don't matter, but today we're showing we do." Her words sparked a wave of applause and agreement. Mark felt palms pressing against him, encouragement winding through the crowd. "Yes, let them hear us," shouted Lila, her voice rising above the rest. In that moment of unity, something inside Mark shifted. He wasn't just a CEO anymore, he was one of them. He felt their strength and their pain. This isn't just about fighting for our voices, he called out. This is about standing up for each other. This is about coming together and showing that we won't back down. The crowd erupted in a chant of solidarity, their collective power washing over him like warm sunlight breaking through clouds. Simon stood at a distance, watching the transformation unfold before him. His expression softened. As the chanting grew louder, Mark took a step back, scanning the crowd for familiar faces, each one echoed with stories of hope and heartache. He found Clara, her eyes shining with determination as she stepped up to the front. "We need decision-makers who listen," she declared. "We deserve a seat at the table." Mark nodded, feeling his resolve strengthen. "Exactly. We're not demanding handouts. We want partnership. We want a future built on collaboration and mutual respect." Beneath the weight of their shared determination, Mark realized clarity flickered in the air, that real change was waiting not just within boardroom walls, but in these streets, overflowing with vibrant stories. The police sirens faded into the distance, but the unity among the crowd burned brighter than ever. Just as Mark finished, Simon broke through the perimeter, approaching the front of the crowd. "I may have doubted this initiative," he announced, voice clear and authoritative. "But if Mark believes in this community, then we should too. If you're willing to share your insights, we promise to listen." Mark's heart swelled at Simon's shift in attitude. The community's energy surged, voices rising in triumph. They knew they were not solely fighting for their voices, but for their futures and connections. In that moment, Mark felt liberated. Change wasn't something he needed to force, it was a shared journey, a collective heartbeat pulsing toward brighter tomorrows. As he looked into the eyes of his community, laughter and tears mingled in the air, with the crowd buzzing with possibility. Mark lifted his hands in prayer-like gratitude. "Together, we can transform this energy into action. Let us turn our stories into plans. Create avenues for mentorship, job opportunities, and hope." The crowd erupted in cheers that echoed through the blocks, solidifying a newfound bond. Later that evening, under a sky laced with stars, local leaders gathered to formulate action plans. Mark sat among them, listening with bated breath. They shared ideas, exchanged stories, and crafted a roadmap that not only prioritized opportunities but also centered their voices. As Mark watched the camaraderie blossom, he felt the warmth of connection wrap around him. They were all there for one common goal: to create lasting change rooted in their collective narrative. In the weeks that followed, the energy that began that day didn't fade. It ignited into a movement. The company transformed, moving from mere profit-chasing to community building. Mark's voice had evolved into a chorus welcoming dialogue. Each quarter, community members gathered with executives to share insights and develop plans together. As he often recounted the initial protest, Mark grew aware that he had arrived at a crossroads in life, a choice to prioritize profit or people. He'd chosen love, unity, and deeper connections. On a bright Sunday afternoon, Mark stood before an audience of community members and board executives in a gathering akin to a family reunion. Smiles lit the room, and he felt the weight of joy attending to him. "This is our journey together. Not one heart alone carrying the burden, but many," he said, tears welling in his eyes. As he closed his speech, he saw Amy standing at the back, a radiant smile breaking across her face. Whatever rifts had torn them apart were healing, and hope filled the air like the warmth of a summer breeze. The applause enveloped him like a soothing embrace, and in that moment, Mark knew they had already won. The crowd rose, cheering not just for him but for one another, each voice a note in the symphony of transformation. He stepped back, absorbing the sight before him, a vibrant family united. Mark felt his heart swell, filled not just with love, but also with an unwavering understanding. Together, they could overcome anything. This was the moment, and he knew, with anticipation crackling around him, that true change had only just begun. As this journey unfolded, he realized something profound. They were not just creating history. They were building a future, one of resilience, hope, and unity. Do you want to join this transformative journey? You need to subscribe now to get exclusive stories that inspire connection and change. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and spread this message to others. Comment your reactions and feelings about this powerful ending. What does community mean to you? Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Don't wait not even one more second to share. Your support fuels our fire for change.